This conference will now be recorded.
In today's session, we'll continue to discuss about resource meta arguments. Resource meta arguments. As we already discussed in yesterday's session, in resource block, we can define some arguments. Which are specific to any resource type. In a resource block, we can specify some arguments which are specific to some resource block, but there are some arguments which are common for all the resource type. Those arguments we call it as a resource meta arguments. As we already discussed in the last session, right? We are creating various resources. Using the resource block. Each resource block is going to represent some type of a resource that can be created and managed using Terraform. And each resource type, each resource body, that resource block body will take some arguments. Most of the arguments are specific to that resource type, but some of the arguments are common for any type of resource we are managing using Terraform, that we call it as a meta arguments. The Terraform language defines several meta arguments which can be used with any type of resource to change it is going to change the behavior of the resource, how it works. So meta arguments, we have various meta arguments. We'll discuss one after the other. So in the resource block, we have resource meta arguments. The Terraform language defines several meta arguments which can be used with any type of resource. The meta arguments can be used with any type of resource to change the behavior of the resource. Now, here there are various types of resources like count, for each, life cycle, provisioner, depends on, like that. We already discussed count. So what is this count meta argument? How it works, right? This count meta arguments, for creating a multiple resources, we can use this count meta argument. For creating multiple resource instances according to count. Multiple types of resources of the type, multiple types of same resources will be created according to the count. We have similarly, there is something called for each. We'll try to understand in detail again. So to create multiple instances, multiple resource instances, multiple resource instances. Here, don't consider instance as server here. Don't consider this instance as a server here. Resource instance in the sense, whatever resource type you are using, it will create those many instances of that resource according to the counter for each. So it will, to create a multiple instances according to map or set of strings. We can use maps. You can use set with for each. Maps and sets, set of strings, kind of array of strings or set of strings, we can use with for each. We will discuss in detail. We'll create some resources using for each. We will create some resources using count also. Similarly, we have some meta argument called depends on, depends on, depends on. So by default, Terraform will prepare the dependencies, right? It will prepare the dependencies internally. It will know already by default. It will come to know what resources depends on another resource. What resource has to be created first in order to create another resource. Let's say you are creating a subnet. Let's say you are creating a subnet under one VPC, and you are creating a VPC. You are creating a VPC also using Terraform configuration. You no need to explicitly specify what is depends on what resource. Just to give an example, you are creating a VPC. You are creating a VPC, its subnets, its route tables, all those things using Terraform. In Terraform script, you have provided. In Terraform script, you just provided VPC subnets. You are referencing that subnet IDs in the route tables, and you are referencing the VPC IDs in the subnets blocks. Terraform will come to know what resource has to be created in order to create the other resource. So it know what is depends on which one. It will identify the dependency. But suppose you have some hidden resource or hidden module dependencies that can't automatically interfere. Suppose you have some resource that is hidden resource or module. You are having a dependency on the one more resource, but that is not part of the same module. It is part of the different module. Then you can use this depends on to handle to handle to handle hidden resource or module dependencies. Module dependencies. The Terraform can't infer. That Terraform can't infer. So you can use depends. You can use depends on for handling the hidden dependencies for any resource which you have to create. So there is something called depends on for specifying the hidden dependencies. So this depends on, if you see the official documentation, the depends on, use the depends on meta argument to handle the hidden resource or module dependencies that Terraform cannot automatically infer. You only need to explicitly specify a dependency when a resource or a module relies on another resource behavior but does not access any of the resources in its arguments. So suppose you have some hidden dependencies. So when you are creating one resource, just to give an example, you are creating one IAM role. They have given here one example. If you see, you are creating one IAM role with the required policies, and here you are creating a IAM role first, and you are creating an instance profile, IAM instance profile using that role. Then you are trying to use that instance profile, that IAM role with your EC2 instance. Then here you can say this EC2 instance. This EC2 instance is depends on this one. This EC2 instances depend on this one. So what it does, first it will create this resource. First it will create this resource. In order to create this resource, some resources might be depend on another resource. Some resources might be depends on another resource, but those resources may not be, Terraform may not be automatically identify the hidden dependencies. They cannot identify. Then you can explicitly specify. Something like this depends on this resource. You can refer the resources dependencies also like this, and you are explicitly saying depends on like this. So before creating this resource, Terraform will first create this resource in order to create this resource. You can use depends on for handling the hidden dependencies of any resource or any module, you can use this depends on. Now we have something else like this. We have count, we have for each, we have depends on. Similarly, we have provider. We have a provider. So using this provider meta argument, you can select a non-default provider configuration. You can select a non-default for selecting non-default provider configuration. So already you have defined the provider block. In your Terraform code. But let's say you can handle multiple providers. You can have a multiple providers. Then for selecting the non-default provider, you can use this provider meta argument in a resource block. You can use this provider meta argument for a resource block. Something like this. Just to give an example, in AWS, you have two various regions. Let's say in AWS you have two various regions. Now in your Terraform code, you have specified the provider like this. AWS region, you specified AP South 1, and you have a one more AWS region. Let's say you can say region AP South 2, like Hyderabad region, like this. You can give alias. You can give alias like this. You can give alias. So whatever name you want to give, you can give alias Hyderabad like that. Now in your Terraform code, let's say you have defined a resource. You defined a resource like this. Resource AWS underscore instance. Let's say you are giving something like this. You specified AMI. Whatever AMI ID, and instance type, and other arguments. Now if we have a configuration, this is like a default provider configuration. Terraform will create this resource in this default provider. But let's say I have to create resources in another region of the same AWS provider. So what you can say, suppose one instance has to be created in Hyderabad, another instance has to be created in Mumbai. You can say something like this. Here in the resource block, you can use the provider meta argument. In the provider meta argument like this, something like this, AWS dot this alias name. Now Terraform this resource will be created as per this provider configuration, the first one, the default one. This resource will be created in Hyderabad region because of this provider meta argument. Are you guys clear what I am trying to say? This provider is a one more meta argument inside the resource block. This is a meta argument in the resource block. You can use this provider meta argument for selecting non-default provider configurations. Using this provider meta argument, we can select the non-default provider configurations. This is like a non-default. This is not a default one. This is non-default. You can select the non-default provider configuration using this provider meta argument. I'll practically show that also. But is everyone clear what is this provider meta argument? Like this, you have a provider meta argument. This provider meta argument for selecting non-default. The provider meta argument specifies which provider configurations to use for a resource. The provider meta argument specifies which provider configuration to use for a resource, overriding the Terraform default behavior of selecting and based on the resource type name. So its value should be an unquoted, it should be an unquoted provider.alias reference, something like this. You have a provider, one provider, another provider. You can use this meta argument in an unquoted, you should not keep this in a double quotes. You can refer like this, provider meta argument. So in the documentation itself, there is a detailed way. In the provider configuration, we already discussed, we can optionally create a multiple configurations of a single provider, usually to manage resources in a different regions. So you can provide multiple provider configurations using provider block. We can provide multiple provider configuration like this. Using provider block, you can provide multiple provider configurations for creating, usually creating or managing resources in a different regions or multi-region service. Each provider can have one default region and any other number or alternate configurations that include an extra name segment alias or alias like this. This is like a default, provider, and this is like a extra or additional provider configuration, non-default configuration. We can use alias, you can use anything here, but you can refer that here in the provider meta argument. Is everyone clear? This provider meta argument, which we can use for any type of resource which we are handling using Terraform, that can be AWS provider, GCP provider, or any resource, again, any resource in that provider. That's what we are giving here, right? This is different region only. Okay, so I am explaining this is with a different region only, not same region. Now we have similarly life cycle. There is a one more meta argument. There is one more meta argument called life cycle meta argument. So we can use this life cycle meta argument. We can use this life cycle meta argument. We have something called life cycle. This is life cycle meta argument with resource type. Life cycle meta argument with resource type. A standard resource behavior can be altered. The standard resource behavior can be altered using special nested lifecycle block within a resource block. The standard resource behavior can be altered. The standard resource behavior can be altered using special nested lifecycle block within a resource block. We have some lifecycle you can handle using this meta argument. The resource behavior, we already discussed how the resource behavior works, but the resource behaviors, some details of the resource behavior can be customized using lifecycle block within the resource block body. Like we have some life cycles like create before destroy, right? Prevent destroy, ignore changes. Like this, we have some life cycle behaviors. We can use these options. We can use these options. So the lifecycle nested block, that will appear within the resource block. The lifecycle block and its contents are meta arguments available for all resource block, that regardless of type. So the arguments will be available. The arguments available within a lifecycle block are like create before destroy, prevent destroy, ignore changes, like that. We have some arguments available within the lifecycle block. What is this create before destroy? What is prevent destroy? What is ignore changes? How it works? How it is going to change the default behavior of your resource? We'll try to understand practically. But you can use this lifecycle block, this lifecycle meta argument. You can use this lifecycle meta argument for altering the standard resource behavior. The standard resource behavior or the default resource behavior. Standard or default resource behavior can be altered using a special nested life cycle block within the resource block. Resource block is a main block, a top level block. Resource block is a top level block. This life cycle is a block within the resource block. That's why I'm saying nested. This is a meta argument. So this life cycle block will take some arguments like create, before, destroy, prevent, destroy, ignore changes, like that. We'll practically discuss this life cycle meta argument also. This life cycle meta arguments also later. Similarly, we have something called provisioner. We have something called provisioners and connections, provisioners and connections. So for taking extra actions, after resource creation, for taking extra actions after resource creation, example, I am saying install some install some application or software on a server. Once the resource is created, I want to install some softwares, or I want to run some I want to install some scripts, or I want to run some scripts, or do something on your provisioner machine once the resource is created, or execute something in your provisioner machine, local machine where you are running your scripts. You can use this provisioner. For taking some extra actions after resource is created, you can use this provisioners. So provisioners is useful to perform some actions on the local machine in the sense where you are running your Terraform configurations, or a remote machine. The remote machine is the system which you created using Terraform. You can take some actions on the local machine, that is where you are running your Terraform configurations, or a remote machine, that is a machine created using Terraform itself, in order to prepare the servers or the infrastructure objects for a service. So we will discuss in detail what is this provisioners, right? There is like local execute provisioner, remote execute provisioner. We have something like this: local execute provisioner. We have something like remote execute provisioner, local execute provisioner, remote execute provisioner. Like this, we have some provisioners: local execute provisioner, remote execute provisioner, like that. We will discuss this provisioners later. This provisioners is to take some actions. This provisioner is used to take some actions after creating a resources. You can take some action on the local machine. Local machine is nothing but the machine where you are running your Terraform commands, or actions which we can perform on the remote machine. The remote machine is basically the server which is created by Terraform itself. In detail, what is this local execute provisioner, remote execute provisioner? We will discuss all these things later. But these are the meta arguments which we can use for any type of resource which we are using with Terraform. Is everyone clear? What is the meta arguments in Terraform? What is depends on, what is count, what is for each provider, life cycle, provisioner, at high level, before we get into detailed labs? Yesterday we already discussed this count. Meta argument. Now let's create a resources using this meta argument. Now let me go with a standard way of sharing the folders with you guys. I will try to share all these Terraform scripts also, whatever I'm creating. So let me go a standard way. What I will do, I'll create a folder, separate folder for each topic which I'm going to execute. Let me go to my desktop. Terraform lab. I'll create one folder called, let's say, count. I'll say count meta argument meta arg demo. So I'm just creating a folder. In this folders, I'll create a Terraform configurations as per that topic, so that I will share this folder with you so that you can understand easily the code. So let me first open this folder. I don't have anything. I don't have anything in this. Let me open this folder using Visual Studio Code. Let me open this folder using Visual Studio Code. To write the code, I'm opening that folder using Visual Studio Code. Let me open that folder using Visual Studio Code. Now I'll create a Terraform configuration file to demonstrate that meta argument called count. So I don't have any folder. Guys, it is better to maintain provider configurations in a separate file, resource configurations in a separate file. Instead of, let me show you. Suppose instead of writing everything in a single file, like your Terraform block, instead of writing everything in a Terraform block, like Terraform block, provider block, instead of writing in a single file like this, we can maintain in a separate files also. Let me show that for better readability, better maintenance also. You can have a multiple Terraform files. Each Terraform file have like provider information separately, like that. So let me use this AWS provider. Let me use this AWS provider only. Let me use this AWS provider. Let me use this AWS provider only. Whatever I have already created yesterday, but since this is a separate folder, now here I am saying profile. Here I am going to say profile. That profile I have created Terraform, Terraform, Terraform profile using AWS CLI. Using AWS CLI, I have created a Terraform profile where I have my access keys and secret keys, right, to connect to the AWS. And the region, I'm saying region, I'm saying region, I'm saying region as a AP South 1. Now let me create a resource. Let me create a resource. Resource AWS underscore instance. You may have a doubt, sir, why auto suggestions are not coming? Why auto suggestions are not coming? The moment I initialize Terraform init only, that auto suggestions will come, because in this Terraform working directory, we can consider this as a root module. As of now, did I initialize the Terraform? Is the Terraform has downloaded that plugin, that provider plugin, AWS provider plugin in this folder? If you see working folder, no. So that's why we are not getting that auto suggestions. That is fine. That is fine. Let me say I am saying something like this. I am saying something like this. AMI, whatever AMI in the Mumbai region. In the Mumbai region, I will take some AMI ID. I'll take some AMI ID. Suppose you don't want to manually take the AMI ID. You don't want to manually take the AMI ID. Can I use another block we discussed in HCL fundamentals? In HCL configuration language fundamentals, we discussed one concept. Which block I can use to get the data created or managed outside Terraform? To get some resource information. I want to get some resource information which is created or managed outside of Terraform. Guys, we discussed, right? You forgot, huh? Data block, data block, data block, data block. Using data block, I can get some information Using data block, I can get some information using data block. I can get some information using data block. That information can I use in the Terraform configurations in another blocks like that, resource block like that. I have shown with the lab also. Let's say I don't want to manually take this AMI. I don't want to manually get this AMI. I don't want to manually get this AMI. Let's say if I go to AMI catalog, if I go to AMI catalog, right? If I go to AMIs, I don't want to get this AMI manually. Or AMIs, if I go here, I don't want to manually, get this AMI like Ubuntu AMI ID in this region or Red Hat or CentOS, whatever. I don't want to manually get this ID. I don't want to manually use this ID here. Let's say I don't want to manually use this ID. There is a way I can get this information using another block. What is that block? We already discussed. I want to get this information. It is not like I want to pass this information. Understand? I want to get. For passing at runtime, I can use variables. I am saying I want to get this information. I want to get some resource information. I want to get some resource information. The resource is created and managed outside of Terraform. That is data block. Guys, we discussed one day the data block, provider block, Terraform block. But what you guys are doing? You guys are just attending the sessions and leaving. Huh? Now, instead of getting this way, right, I can get the same information using data block. If you go to this provider, the way we have a resources to manage and create the resources, there is a data. The way you have a resources, right, and EC2, the way you are having a resources types to create and manage resources, there is something called data sources. There is something called data sources. Using this, using this, using this, I can get the using this I can get the data of this resource. We discussed already data block, Terraform documentation. If you see data source or data block, data sources, what we told already, data sources will allow Terraform to use the information defined outside of Terraform or another separate Terraform configuration, right? A data source is accessed via special kind of resource. A data source is accessed via special kind of resource known as data resource declared using data block. Now you can get the data of any resource supported by data of any data source supported by that provider. If you see, is this provider, AWS provider, is it supporting data source of this type, data source of this type? So you can use data and that type of source provider is giving, and you can apply some filters. You can apply some filters to get the data. So this is already discussed. I have given sample also in the documentation. Did you guys observe? If required, you can get information about AWS instance also, which is created outside of Terraform, like this, using data of AWS instance, using data of AWS EIP, using data of all these things, this using this provider under this EC2 category, these type of data sources are supported by that provider. I can gather the information like this. Guys, this is already discussed, but this is a different block, data block, AWS underscore AMI, AWS underscore AMI. I can say some local name. I can say Red Hat latest, something like this. And I can apply some filters. I can apply some filters like this virtualization type HVM. I can apply some filters and I can say owner, owner, AWS itself, owners. You can say Amazon, owners. If the owner list of AMIs owners to limit the search values and account ID, that is self. If you are having your own AMI ID, you can say owner as self, otherwise owner as Amazon, like this. Owner has Amazon like this. You can apply all these filters. You can apply all these filters. Owner, something like this. Owner, Amazon like this. If this is owned by Amazon, and you can apply some other filters also, because you need to search in a such a way that it has to return only one AMI. So I am saying filter based on the root device type EBS, and I am applying filter based on the name also. Suppose I need some Red Hat latest AMI, I can say something like this. You can search here also if required, and you can use all those filters. Here you can search. Here you can search. If you go to AMIs, you can search. You can search here. Let's say you have owner. You have owner, right? You can search here. Owner, right? Owner, I am saying Amazon. One second. Let's say owner. Let's say owner alias. Okay, fine. Here it is fine. Owner, you can say alias. Owner alias also fine. Like Amazon. You can search to get those data also. One second. Something like this. Owner alias Amazon. All Amazon managed images, and you can apply lot of filters like AMI name. Let's say AMI name equals to Red Hat something. Red Hat something. That Red Hat AMI ID will be there, right? That AMI name. You have names like this. You have names like this. You have names like this. This is like a name. Amazon. Amazon slash Red Hat something. Let me filter so that you can use all these filters in your data also. AMI name like this. Let me get this. Why to waste much time? Let me get the AMI name basically. Let me get the AMI name. The AMI name of this Red Hat. Why to worry most of the time? Let's say I am not going to use the ID directly. I am not going to use the ID directly. I am going to use kind of a filters to get this AMI. So I will say the name of the AMI, the name of the AMI, the root device type is EBS. I am using this filter. The root device type is EBS like this. Root device type is EBS like this. And I am saying owner. Owner is Amazon. Owner is Amazon. And I can use some ID, something like this, something like this, something like this, something like this, something like this. I can say I can use some type of regular expressions also. And one more filter, most recent true, like that. there is a one more. All these options are specific to this resource only, guys. Again, all these filters are specific to this data source only. So I am saying most recent true, all these things I am using as a filter here. I'm using as a filter here. So now this will return one AMI ID. This is going to return AMI ID. This is data block. We already discussed, but again I am explaining today. This is a data block. So it based on this all the data, based on all these filters and data, this is going to fetch the AMI ID. This is going to fetch the AMI ID. So instead of hard coding, you can get some information from data block. Instead of hard coding like this here, you can get this information from the data block. But again, how to refer this one? Here you can refer something like this. Data dot data source dot local name dot ID. So this is going to fetch some information from that provider. This data block, data source block is going to fetch some information from that provider. Then I am referencing that here. So let it be any ID. Is it going to fetch the AMI ID in that region based on all these filters? Whatever, in whatever region I am running this script? Yes. So you can fetch some information using data block, data source block. You can get some information about the resource which is created or managed outside of Terraform or outside of different configuration of Terraform. You can get like this. This is also sometimes we need to use to get some information and use that information here. Guys, this is not a meta argument. This is not a meta argument, but this is a data block. But I thought of explaining this one also instead of hard coding. Is everyone clear? What do you mean by this? What do you mean by this? What this is doing? Is everyone clear? Now I can use like this. I can use like this. Now let's say instance type. Instance type. Guys, if you want to know more details about the data of this data source or the resource of this type, where you can see this is also some type of a special resource, data resource provided by that provider. This is a resource type provided that provider. If I want to see this information about the data source or a resource type information, what arguments I can use, where we can check, where I'm checking first of all, where I'm checking all this information about all these options, arguments in the Terraform registry, in the Terraform registry documentation, provider documentation. Now, if you see, there is a resource. There is a resource of AWS underscore instance. There is a resource of AWS underscore instance. In this also they have given this example, right? Most recent like this. Most recent like this they have given. Most recent like this they have given, right? And you can no, you can use all these things also like this. If you suppose you need a Ubuntu image, you can use something like this. And there is a Red Hat images, you can use something else like this. All these things you can use. All these things you can use like this. They have already given this one. They have already given this one. Suppose I need this one. I need to apply the filter in a correct way. Again, if I use wrong filter, is this data source will be able to get the corrected data, the AMI ID? If I use wrong filters, again, no. So before using, you can verify, you can verify, you can verify all these things. Let's say AMI name, AMI name, you can verify based on there is a name for the AMIs also. There is a name for the AMIs also. You can see the name, AMI name. You can use these names as a filters also. You can use these names as a filters also for applying the filter. So last time I manually searched, I manually searched using this AMI ID, manually searched using that AMI ID. I manually searched using that AMI ID. Then I used those as a filters so that I can get the correct result. AMI name, source is this, like this. We have something like this. So you can use this name. You can use this name like this also. AMI name. You can apply like this AMI name. Let's leave this. Let's leave this like this also. You can apply, and I can refer here. And if you see the other values for this resource type arguments, you can see here in the documentation, right? What arguments we already told. AMI, instance type. I'm just taking only few options here. Let me take just instance type. T2.micro, T2.micro, instance type. T2.micro I'm creating. I'll come to the count. I'll come to that count meta arguments. I'll come to that count meta arguments. Now I am not using count. Let's say I will give a tags also. I'll give a tags also. Name tag, name tag, value, web, like this. Now let me go to this folder. Let me go to this folder. I will do the initialization first. I'll go to the I will do the initialization. Let me go to that folder and I'll go to this command prompt. Sir, if the data block is taken it correct or not, there is a way to debug. You can print that into output. There is output block. There is output block. What it is returning also, you can use using output block. Using output block, you can use that output block to display. Before using, if you want to see, you can use something like this using output block. Using output block, you can display also. Now it will display. The value will be displayed when we say Terraform init or basically Terraform plan. That time it will display this value also. Before using, if required, you can display like this. You no need to apply. You no need to apply. It will get it displayed also for troubleshooting. For troubleshooting, guys, if you know the concept, right? If you know the filters, you are going to get the correct value. But if you give wrong filters to the Terraform, does Terraform will be able to get the data? This data block is again making a API calls. The data block is again making a API calls to AWS using all these things, and it is going to get the data. And you are using wrong filters and wrong input in the data block. You can't blame Terraform, right? Whatever you are giving here, based on that, either Terraform is making a API calls using that provider to get the data. This is nothing but a piece of code. Terraform is making API calls using provider to get the data of this type. If you give wrong filters, it will not work. Let me show that. If I give output block, I can see the value also. Let's execute Terraform init. First, let me execute Terraform init in this folder. I'll go to this from my local laptop. I'll go to this terminal. I'll go to this terminal. I'll go to this terminal. Now this is where I have a Terraform file. I have not initialized anything. So let me make it first Terraform init. Terraform init. I'm initializing, so it is downloading the required provider plugin. Required provider plugin. Required provider plugin. Guys, that version constraints I have already discussed. I am not discussing again. Here I have just mentioned exactly. So since I have mentioned exactly, is it downloading the latest version only? Even though I don't specify, it is going to download the latest version. But if you want to specify the operators also, you can specify. Now let's download this plugin. Now, I already told when we execute a Terraform init, we got a Terraform provider that provides us, and this Terraform dependency lock file. In the dependency lock file, it has captured the version and constraint. Constraint I have just used in exactly. So it is like this only. Now let me execute Terraform validate to validate if required. Terraform validate. So an argument owner is not expected. It is owners. Okay, 1 second. It is owners like this. So you can check the documentation. It is saying argument owner is not expected in this data block. You can check the documentation. It is not owner. It is not owner. It is owners. It seems. It is owners. It seems. Let's go to this document. Owners. Owners. It is not owner. So it is giving validation. Is giving that. Let me validate again after fixing. Now it is expecting a list. It is not string. It is saying list of strings. Understand? It is a string. It is a string, but it is expecting a list, something like this. List of strings. You can define something like this also. That is list of strings. Let's validate. Now my Terraform configuration is valid. Now let's say Terraform plan. Terraform plan. Let's see what is going to happen. Let's see what is going to happen. Now it is saying this resource planning to add. Since I used output block, it is printing here. What is the ID it is getting? Is it getting the AMI ID using that data block? Using all this information with the help of the filters, is it getting the AMI ID? You no need to use output block also. You no need to use output block also. You will come to know in the plan itself. You'll come to know in the plan itself. Let me show you Terraform plan. Terraform plan. Now, do you see here? Do you see here in the EC2 instance one resource? Do you see this one? Is this hard coded in my Terraform configuration? That AMI ID, is it hard coded in my Terraform configurations? No. But from where it is getting? From where it is getting? This is getting using data block. Now, before applying itself, are you coming to know the data which is gathered using data block? Wherever you are referring, you no need to use output block also to display. Do you see here itself the value when we are planning? Yes. Now I am not using any meta argument. I am not using any meta argument. I am not using any meta argument. So I am not using any meta count argument. So how many resources will be created of this resource type using this information? By default, one. Let me show that. Let me show that step by step. We'll do Terraform apply. Guys, these instances I already have manually created in my AWS account. These instances I already have manually created in AWS account. These are not managed by Terraform. These are not managed by Terraform. These are manually created. So leave about it. Sir, you have these many servers already. These are manually created using console. These are not created using any Terraform configurations. Leave it. Now, I am saying Terraform apply. If filters are giving more than one value, you need to granular your filter, right? That is you have to do. You apply more filters to get the exact value. You apply more filters. The way I go to AWS console, right? Just to give an example, I went to AWS console. Did I manually filter before whatever filters I was using? Did I apply something like this? Same thing I was using there only, right? Owner. I applied all these filters, right, before I was using to get the single record. So you need to granular your filters. Terraform will not do anything. You need to filter and you need to get the single result. Now AWS is creating one instance, only one instance. It is creating one instance. I already told I don't want to I don't want to tell every time there is a state file. As of now, there is no state. It is creating. It is comparing the desired state. This is your current configuration is the desired state. It is going to compare the desired state with the current state, the real infrastructure state, the real infrastructure using state file. And if there is no resources in the real configuration, real provider, and it is there in the configuration, it will create object. All those things. Is there a better way to do this? It's a manual task. What is this manual task? What is this manual task? You are not doing any manual task here. Once you provide this information, once you provide this information, AWS is giving. Once you provide this information, Terraform is handling this one. There is no manual configuration here, right? But if you ask something like this, right? Does Terraform can handle? If you don't give like this, you are giving something like this. It will give n number of results. Can you blame Terraform? You are giving so many results like this. You have a various Red Hat images, right? You have various Red Hat images. You can't blame Terraform. This is not a manual. This is your data. Otherwise, you hard code. If you don't want, you go to AWS, select your AMI hard code. If you are feeling this is lot of manual task, but that is not the correct way, right? If you need to handle some data dynamically, you need to apply some logic. This data block is applying that logic for you to get the latest AMI like this. Sir, TF state, can you explain? I missed. Go through the recording, Nitin. If you miss, I can't teach for everyone, whoever is not attending. I already explained Terraform state. I already explained a lot of things. If you miss, go through the recording. Right? I can't teach for everyone, whoever is joining in between. Okay. Now, it has created one resource. It has created one resource. Now, it has created only one instance. We need to use filters these many times, or can we use list of them and use it? Pawan, refer the documentation. This is not the way you need. A Terraform is going to, it's a program. Your Terraform will accept some arguments. You can't give your own way of defining the arguments, okay? Either you pass as a value or you get the data from data block. Only two options is there. Either you hard code here or you get it using data block, or you hard code here. If you don't want to hard code here, there is a way to pass the value, but that value you need to pass using variable. Only three options. You get the data using data block and refer, or you hard code the value here itself, or you pass the value. Only three options is there. It is not like, sir, I don't want to apply so many filters. Is there a way? AWS will give 100 results. AWS has a 100 AMIs. Does the instance can be created using 100 different AMIs? Does one instance can be created using 100 different AMIs? It is going to expect only one. Understand the concepts. AWS instance can be created using only one AMI. What is the value here? You refer this document, what type of value this AMI is expected by your EC2 instance, this instance resource type. In the argument, what is the value it is expecting? This AMI, it's expecting a string. that AMI. You can't give array list like that. You can't give array list like that. To create one AWS instance, can you pass array of AMIs? You want to create one AWS instance. If you know AWS concept, you will understand all these things. Can I use two AMIs to create a single instance? Understand one thing. Can I use two AMIs or three AMIs to create a single instance? One instance can be created using two AMIs or three AMIs? No. You know AWS, right? No. You can use only one AMI. So you are getting that AMI using these filters. Suppose you don't want to apply filters like this, there is a dynamic block. There is a dynamic block, or you need to use some kind of looping here also. You need to use some kind of a looping here also. But you need to use maps, strings, maps, keys, all these things, that looping. So you can apply a filter, this dynamic block. This can be generated dynamically. You don't want to do like this three times. This block itself can be generated multiple times using dynamic block. Dynamic block. That to generate the dynamic block, you need to have a concept of loops, variables, all those things. That time you will come to know. Suppose there is a dynamic block you can use. You can use dynamic block to generate these type of repeated statements. But don't jump on one suggestion. Don't jump to advanced classes and don't deviate the topic which I am discussing. Everything will be discussed. Don't be hurry. Okay, I am trying to explain something, you are asking for your use case. Maybe you are working today, you need to do something like this, and you are asking something today. I can't continue the flow. I am explaining something, you are asking something else. This will be covered. You refer the syllabus. There is a something called dynamic block. So that time I will explain the dynamic block. So wait for all the topics. If you don't have a syllabus copy, refer the syllabus copy. You have to have a syllabus copy in your hand. What is going to be discussed, what is covered so far, what is going to be covered in the future. If you jump in between and asking something else, I am explaining ABC, you are asking statements, then no one can understand. So first have a patience, check the syllabus copy. There is something called dynamic blocks. So this is comes under dynamic block. Without explaining variables, without explaining this resource block, if I directly explain dynamic blocks, you can't understand, right? Without explaining what is variable, without explaining what is loops, what is conditions, if I directly explain all these advanced concepts, if I use, no one can understand. So we will discuss this dynamic block later, not now. Okay, now let's continue on the basics, the resource meta argument. Now we created one resource using this one. If I go to AWS, I can see one server. But is there a way to create a multiple servers of that resource type? Yes, we can use count. Count. Count will expect only numbers, guys. One more important point you need to remember, that count meta argument. Count meta argument will expect what? Only numbers. Count meta argument will expect only value. Value has a whole number. It's a value, number value. The count argument will expect value has a whole number. So Terraform will create that many instances. Now if I say count as 2, or let's say count as 5, using this AMI, using this instance type, with these tags, how many instances will be created? Because of this, 5. And how it will handle the names, how it will handle the names, local names. how it will handle the local names here. The local names will be indexed like this. So the name will be something like this. The identifier, your resource type, your resource type, your resource type dot the local name hyphen 0 0 0 1 2 3 4. So what is this? Resource type dot resource local name. Since there are multiple, each resource will be indexed like this. The local resource name, the local resource names will be like this in the state file. Is everyone clear on this point? This 5 instances will be created. The identifier for those resources will be something like this. The identifier for those resources will be something like this. Is everyone clear on this point? Now, let me run this. Let me run this. Let me show Terraform plan. I have as of now one resource already. As of now, I have already one resource. So is it going to create only 4 resources? Let's say Terraform plan, just planning I am doing. Just planning I am doing. Now what it is saying? 4 to add. Why it is saying 4 to add instead of 5 to add? Is it already one resource is there? Because we already created last time one, right? So that's why it is saying 4 to add. If you see the names, the resource identifier names, so this is going to perform the following action. Earlier, since there was no meta argument, count meta argument, so it has created like this. Now it is just updating the index. It is not going to create this resource. It is just updating this into in the state file. It is just updating is its identifier. It is not creating any new resource. But is this resource will be created using same AMI, using same instance type as per the Terraform resource configuration? Yes. Another instance with same AMI, same instance type. Like this, it will be created. Let's say Terraform apply. Terraform apply. Now, if I go to AWS, let me log in. Let me log in. Let me log in to the AWS. Let me refresh. Let me refresh. Now, do you see with this tag, I am using tags also. As of now, there is only one server. As of now, there is only one server. Let me use yes, or you can use auto approve option. You can use auto approve option. Otherwise, you every time you need to say yes when you are performing apply or destroy. You need to say yes. Otherwise, you need to use one option called auto approve. Now it is creating these resources. It is creating these resources. It is creating these resources. Now can you see like this 1 2 3 4 5 resources like that with same tag. It is getting created. Let's say if you want to access the index, if you want to access the index, right? If you want to access the index, you can access the index. There will be an index number, the distinct index number starting with 0 corresponding to that instance, right? So we can access that index also if required. Something like this. We already discussed, right? You can use something like this. That index value you can access count dot index also like this if you want to access. Now is my instances will be tagged like this: web 0, web -1, web -2, web -3, web -4, like this. Web -0, web -2, web -3, web -4, like that. Yes. Now let me run this. Since we are just updating the tag, right? Is it going to do in place update? In place update, or is it like a destroy and recreate? Which one? We already discussed all these things. It is just in place update. It is just in place update. Terraform plan. Let me run the Terraform plan so that it will show. Now it is saying earlier it was like this. Now we are updating like this. Earlier it was like this for this one. Earlier it was like this. We are updating like this. Now it is saying in place update. In place update. Now let's say Terraform apply hyphen auto approve. You can use hyphen auto approve or hyphen auto approve. You can use to approve without confirmation. It will approve. Without confirmation, it will approve. Without confirmation, it will approve. Now it is getting modified. Let me refresh here. Do you see something like this? Web -0, web -1, web -2, web -3, web -4, like that. You can access the index also of that count like this. Is everyone clear? Count meta variable. This can be used for any type of resource. In yesterday's session, I used count with another type of resource. What type of resource I used that count? Yesterday I discussed some other resource. What resource I used? Count with other type of resource also. S3 bucket also I have used. S3 bucket also I have used. And one more also I have used. The S3 bucket names I am getting some kind of a random. So did I created a random string also, count of 2, and did I access it? Not sure how many guys saw that code yesterday. Random string I used. Random string I used something like this. So here I have specified, not here, 1 second, not this one, 1 second. Yeah, this one, random pet. I have created something like this. Count of 2. And am I referring that like this also? I already told, right? You can refer these resources in another block. These resources reference. Am I referring something like this? The resource type dot resource name, that index dot id, like that, instead of hard coding, because again I don't want to say 0, 1 like that. I am referring that value like this. Yesterday we used this one. Is everyone clear what is meta argument, that count meta argument, how to access that index of that resource, and how to use that count? Is everyone clear before I go for another meta argument? Is everyone clear? Any doubts, any confusion? If you have any doubts on this count, let me know. But don't jump the topics and ask something else which is not yet discussed. We will discuss all those things. If you have any doubt on this meta argument count, let me know. But if you ask something else which is not discussed, I can't jump the topics, right? We need to go with the flow. We need to go step by step. This count can be used for any type of resource. Suppose AWS instances or databases or load balancers or whatever it is, you can use like this. Now the way you have a count, there is something called for each. let me destroy all these resources. Once our practice is done, let's destroy so that we can avoid the cost. Let's destroy all these resources, whatever has been created using Terraform. Let's destroy. Let's destroy these resources. Now I'll go to for each. I'll go to for each. What is that for each? That is also a meta argument. Meta argument. So how for each will work? And one more point, guys. Yesterday also I told we can't use count and for each together. Understand? Count and for each cannot be used together in a resource block. In a resource block, count and for each cannot be used together. You can't use both. We can't use both in a resource block. We already discussed. So in the documentation also it is there. You can see that count meta argument and for each meta argument cannot be used both. Now if you see here, they are saying for any given resource or module, for any given resource block or module block, can't use both count and for each. And again, count is introduced to the module also. In a module block also, we can use count. They have introduced that module support for count in the Terraform 0.13. So in previous versions, the count can be used with only resources, not with modules. I'll come to that again, what is module in the future session. But let's understand the count module support for count is added in Terraform 0.13 only. In previous versions, we used to have count for only resources, not for modules. For a given resource or a module block, you can't use count and for each both. So by default, resource configures only one object, we already know, and we used count like this. Right? We can access the count index like this, and we can refer like this. We already discussed all these things. We can refer like this also somewhere else. And there is something called for each. When to use for each instead of count, let's understand. So for each is used as an alternative. For each is used as an alternative for count. You can use maps. You can use maps. Or set of strings. As a values to the for each. So if a resource block or module block includes a for each argument, the value should be a map or it should be a set of strings. If we are using for each with a resource block or module block, the value should be a map or set of strings. Terraform will create one instances for each member of a map or set. Terraform will create one resource instance for each member of the map or set. You need to have a basics about maps and sets. Maps are basically key value pairs. Set is like a array of strings. So you can use for each. For a maps or set of strings. Or maps. Maps is like a key value pairs, or set is like a set of strings, list of strings we call it. So just to give an example, the map will be something like this, guys. The map will be something like this. If you want to use a map, right? The map will be something like this. You can use something like this for each, something like this. Key and value. This is key equals to value. This is kind of a map. This is kind of a map. Suppose set of strings in the sense only something like this. Set of strings in the sense it should be something like this. For each you can take something. You can use some functions also. Like set or strings like that. These are like a set of values. Like you can give some value, just values only here. Suppose something like this: Balaji, Balaji, Bhaskar, something like this. Now let's say for this use case, let me tell you, I want to create a IAM user. Called Balaji, Bhaskar, Mithun. Instead of writing like this in my Terraform code, instead of writing like this, let me show that. Let me create a one more folder. Let me create a one more folder. For each set demo. Let me create a separate folder where I will use for each. For each meta argument set demo. Now let me create a folder. I will open that folder. To write the code. Let me open that folder. Guys, before, right, what I'll do, I will have this information in a separate file for better understanding. Let me open that file. Let me open that folder. For each meta-arg set demo, I'll create one folder, provider.tf. I will have a better maintenance and readability. The provider information I will have in a separate block. I will maintain for better maintenance and readability. Provider information in a separate file. I'm just giving something like this, provider.tf, where I will have a Terraform block and provider block. In another file, I will have my resources. This can be anything. Here I will say resource. I want to create a IAM user. I'm using AWS provider. AWS underscore IAM. AWS underscore IAM. Let me go to IAM section. IAM section. This is not certificate manager, API gateway. IAM user. Let's say I want to create IAM user. I'll go to the resource of type IAM user. Suppose I want to create multiple IAM users. Let's say instead of providing something like this, multiple times, AWS underscore IAM, instead of providing something like this, let's say IAM user Balaji, and again this is local name. Instead of creating these many times like Bhaskar, let's say Pawan, like this, let's say something like this. Instead of creating these many times like this, These are tags. You can use these tags for any resources. You can use, instead of duplicating my code, this will also work. This will also work. Let me show you. I am creating a users, IAM users like this. But here, can I use count variable if I have to create three IAM users? But IAM users name should be different, right? IAM user name should be different, right? Can I use count like this here? If I have to create a three IAM users, can I use count like this? Only count like this? No, I can't use count like this. So what I can do here, you have something like this, but I don't want to write a code like this. Let me go to this folder. I have a provider configurations in a separate file for better readability, and I have resources in a separate file like this. So let me go to this folder. Let me go to this folder from my command prompt. I will open this in a command prompt. I'll open this in a command prompt. Now I am in this folder where I have provider information also there, resources also there. Any folder have a file, any folder has a files with the .tf extensions. All these files will be used by your Terraform. Okay. Now I have not initialized. I have not initialized that provider. Let me initialize the provider, that Terraform init. It is going to download. 1 second. There is a typo. Let me fix that problem. Provider. Let's say Terraform init. What I have done. So these names, right? We already discussed. This local name should be unique. The combination of resource type and the local name should be unique. The combination of resource type and local name should be unique. So it is giving this problem also. Now let me use Terraform init. It is going to initialize the plugin. Now if I create Terraform apply, it is going to create three IAM users with these details. It is going to create three IAM users using these three details. But can I use for each, for iterating list of strings, can I use these as a list of strings or sets? Can I use for each? Yes, I will show that. I'll show that. Now initialization, Terraform init, initialization is happening because I am trying to execute Terraform from a different working directory, different modules, right? In every module, different working directories I am executing. So we need to initialize the Terraform so that it can download the plugins. Because I am writing a code in a separate folders for sharing you guys, for to share with you guys. This I have written in a separate folder. This I have written in a separate folder. I need to execute Terraform init in this working directory. Now Terraform plan, Terraform plan. Terraform plan. Now it is saying three resources to add. Terraform apply. Terraform apply. To apply, just to see whether resources will be created or not. Let's see. Hyphen auto approve. Hyphen auto approve. Automatically I want to approve. No manual intervention. If I go to AWS, right? If I go to AWS, I can see three IAM users, but there is a command because Balaji, this Balaji I have already created. Manually, I have already created that IAM user. That's why I got error for this Balaji, but other two users got created. This user is created, this user is created. This I have already created outside of Terraform. This already created outside of Terraform. That's why I'm getting this error. Let me give some other name. Let me give some other name like this. Let me apply. This is also going to be created now. Guys, you read the messages, you can understand the problems also. Now if I go to AWS, if I go to AWS and IAM section, if I go to AWS and IAM section, can we see three IAM users got created, but there are no policies attached. There is no policies attached. There is no groups attached. If required, you can do that one also. If required, you can do that one also. But for now, I have just users. They have a users like this. These three users created with the given tags using Terraform just now. Yes, but I don't want to write a code like this. I don't want to write a code like this, kind of a duplicate, right? So let me say, let me destroy this. Let me destroy this. Let me create a newly using that. Let me destroy this. Let me create using that for each. Let me create that using for each. Let me create that using for each. So I will use that for each. I will use that for each. Let's destroy, and again I will create using for each. I'll create again using for each. It's got destroyed. It's got destroyed. It's got destroyed. Now let me use for each. Let me use for each to create that one. Now, when you guys are using for each, read the documentation. If you want to know more about for each, read the documentation how for each works. So for each, if a resource module or module block includes for each, argument value should be a map or set of strings. First and foremost thing you need to understand, if you are using for each, the value for that for each should be a map like a key value pairs or set of strings. Terraform creates one instance of each member for that map or set. So for each again added in this version like that, they are saying for each is a meta argument defined by Terraform language. It can be used with modules or resources. For each argument accept a map, a map or set of strings. Now here it is what? Is it a map or is it a set of strings? By looking at this itself, you can understand. Is it a map or set of string for each? Is it a map of strings or is it a set of strings? Is it a map or set? I have already explained right here. This one, it is map. It is map, not set. This is map. Key equals to value. Key equals to value. It's a map, not string. If you guys are using map, you can iterate this maps. You can iterate this maps. You you have to iterate this maps like this. You can get the map key like this, map value like this, set of strings like this, guys. Set of strings like this. It's a like this set of strings. This is one string, this is another string, this is another string, this is another string. Is it a key value pairs here? You need to have a basics of maps, list, arrays like that, guys. This is nothing to do with Terraform. This is map, this is set of strings. This is map key value like that. Now you can use something like this. You can use something like this. How to get the value of each string of that list or array? Key, each dot key. This is only key, right? Like you can get the value like this. So I can say something like this. I want to create IAM user. I can use something like this. For each, I can use for each, for each, and I can convert that into a set using some function like this one, and I can pass values. I can pass values, list of values like Balaji, comma Bhaskar, comma power like this. Here I can get the value of this each value of this set using each dot key. Now I no need to write like this. And again, if I have to refer this one in the tags also, if I have to refer in the tags also, I can get refer like this. Now this is simplified of previous one. This is like a simplified of previous one. Now this type of resources will be created. How many instances of these resources will be created because of this? Now this type of resources, how many instances of this resource types will be created now because of these two? Three. Now let me run this. Let me say Terraform plan. Let me say Terraform plan. I destroyed already. Let's say Terraform plan. Let's say Terraform plan. To set small case, capital, there is typo. Small case. Let's say Terraform plan. Now it is saying three resources to add. Three resources to add. You can see, right? IAM user, IAM user with this value once, IAM user with this value once, another IAM user like this, right? Three times, right? I'm just giving local name like this. I'm just giving local name like this. That is fine. If you give any local name also fine. Like this, it is going to create three resources. Because I have already destroyed, it is going to create three resources. Let's say Terraform apply, -auto approve. I'm just demonstrating this. I'm just demonstrating this. I'm just demonstrating this with IAM user. But can I use this for each with any other resource type also? Not only just IAM user. Can I use this for each with any other resource type also? That can be AWS instance also. That can be S3 bucket also. Can I use? Guys, understand what I'm trying to say? Can I use this for each with any other resource? Like that can be AWS instance, that can be S3 bucket, or that can be any other. Yes. This is meta argument, right? Now, again, do you see is those many resources got created here again using that meta argument? We are creating those many instances for each. Let me go to that IAM user. Guys, we will slowly understand. No need to worry. Sir, I don't want to hard code these things here. Can I pass to the Terraform configurations as a variables? As a variables? Yes. We will come to that variables block. We have not yet started how to pass variables, right? So I don't want to hard code like this. Is there a way I can pass these values, argument values to my Terraform configurations when I am applying at runtime? Yes. If you guys are familiar with Ansible, in Ansible also do you have a concept of variables or values? Suppose you guys are familiar with Helm charts. Do you have a concept of values or variables which we can pass to the configurations? Yes. So here also you have a variables concept. We'll come to that. We'll go step by step. First, understand what is this meta argument. Is everyone clear? What is this meta argument for each? It's a set of strings. It is a set of strings. Now you can see if I go to IAM, I can see three IAM users. You can see three IAM users. Now, sir, I want to create three different AWS EC2 instances of each different instance type. Can I use this for each same resource block? Three different instance types I want to create. Last time count we used. Last time count we used, but was it creating only same instance type? Yes. But can I use this for each to create a different types of instances also like that? Yes, if required. Okay. Now, is everyone clear? What is this for each? How we can use for each for any resource? Now let me destroy this. Once we understand the concept, let's destroy. Let's destroy. Now I want to create a three different S3 buckets. I want to create a three different S3 buckets. Can I use for each again? Let me show that. Let me show that. Let me show that. I'm going to use map for that one. I'm going to use a map for that one for demonstrating. I'm going to use map for that one for demonstrating. Let me create a one more folder where I'll write this code for each meta arg map demo. Map demo. So let me open this. Let me open this from the Visual Studio Code, but I'll copy paste this provider because I will maintain in a separate file for better readability. For better readability, I'll maintain that in a separate file. So let me open, let me create a file here, provider related information. I'm giving provider.tf. Guys, each like a Terraform block can be defined in a separate file. Provider information can be defined in a separate file. You can define your resources in a separate file, variables in a separate file also. We'll come to that best practices. Now let's say I'm going to use map. I want to create S3 buckets. I want to create S3 bucket. Now I can use for each. I can use for each something like this. I can use for each something like this for creating multiple S3 buckets. I can use map also something like this. Resource. Let me initialize Terraform so that it will do some kind of auto suggestion for us. Let me go inside that folder for each meta map. So we will initialize Terraform so that we can get some auto suggestions. Terraform init. Let me initialize. Later I'll write this code. Let's initialize the plugin. Let's initialize this plugin. Guys, after this, we will conclude today's session. After for each maps, I'll conclude today's session. Later, we will continue. So we will conclude in next 5 minutes. We'll discuss for each with the maps. Let's initialize that plugin. Now I can get some auto suggestions. Let's say I'm saying resource. Let's say I'm saying resource. This AWS underscore AWS. Somehow auto suggestions are not coming. Okay, let's leave it. Resource. There might be some plugin issue. AWS underscore S3 underscore bucket. We have some type of resource which we can create, right? You go to provider documentation. You go to provider documentation, AWS provider. You can go to these high level services. There is something called S3 bucket, right? You can create S3 bucket like this, S3 bucket like this. But I want to create a multiple S3 buckets. I want to create a multiple S3 bucket for each like this. I want to create multiple S3 bucket like this. Dev bucket, prod bucket, just to give an example. I want to create multiple buckets like this with the different names. But instead of duplicating this, prod, dev, test, instead of duplicating like this, 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 I can use for each here also. I can use for each here also. For each here also. Some local name. Some local name. Instead of creating like this, I can use for each. For each, I can use instead of duplicating like this, I can use for each. How I can use? Let me show you. For maps, I'll say AWS S3 buckets, something that can be anything, something like this, local name. Here I can use for each. Here I can use for each, for underscore each, for list of basically maps here, maps. I can say something like this, dev. This is just a key, one value I can say, one value I can say something like this, something like this. Let's say Mithun Tech, let's say Mithun Tech app S3 bucket something. This is key, this is value. Let's say prod, prod stage or QA, whatever. QA. Just to give an example, I'm using something like this. Based on your requirement, you can use. Now here, I no need to write these many resource blocks. I no need to write these many resource blocks. Now what I will do here, here I can get the key and a value because it's a map, right? It's a map. I can get the key and value. I can get the key. This will be the key. This will be the key. This will be the value. For each map, I can get the key and value. Let's say I can have a bucket like this. I can have a bucket name also like this. Dollar within flower bracket. Each data key hyphen dollar. If required, I can use something like this also. Each dot value. Now my bucket names will be like this. Dev, my bucket names will be like this. Dev, dev hyphen Mithun Tech app S3 bucket, QA hyphen Mithun Tech S3 bucket, prod hyphen Mithun Tech S3 bucket. Like this, I will have a 3. Since I have given 3, can I give 10 also? Here 10 key values, key value, map. This is, we call it as a map. I hope you know maps, right? Programmatic. Now I can give something like this. Now the tags also, can I say, refer here something like this? The name of the bucket, I can refer the name of the bucket. I can refer. Let's say I can refer only something like this here also. Each dot key. So let's see. Now I am using for each for creating these resources. How many resources of this instances will be created? How many resource instances of this type will be created because of this for each? 3, right? Let's say if required, you can say another key also, managed by some value. You can give tags. These are tags, right? Terraform. something like this you can give also. Now let me show the Terraform plan. Let me execute the Terraform plan. Terraform plan. Terraform plan. Now it is saying 3 resources to add. But if you see the bucket names and the tags, right? You can see the bucket names and tags. The bucket name is something like this for one bucket. Another bucket, another bucket, another bucket, something like this. Another bucket like this. And the resource local names and the resource local names, it is not using index. When we are using maps or strings with for each, the resource name is like this: resource type, local name, and the for each that set key or map key, that set key or map key, like that it is using the resource local names. Now let me apply Terraform. Terraform apply. It is going to create this type of resources these many times. Is everyone clear? For each with the maps, and for each with the set of strings. Any questions on this for each before I conclude the session? For each with set, for each with the map. But here, can I do something like this again? Whether you are using each key and each value, both are not same, right? So this is when you guys are using map. When you guys are using map, guys, you should have a basic understanding of where types of data. So I am using a map. In this, what is key? I already told. This is key. This is value. This is key. This is value. This is key. This is value. For each key value, it is going to execute. So for the first time, this is going to be executed for this one. For the second time, this is going to be executed for this one. Third time, this is going to be executed for this one. Guys, this is a basics of data types. Okay, clear? Now you see your buckets. You see your buckets in the cloud. Let me approve. Yes, sir. Let me approve. Yes, sir. Now let's see the buckets in the cloud. Let me go to my AWS account. Let me go to S3 in my Mumbai region. Let me go to Mumbai region. They have a buckets like this, dev-mithun tech app, because I used in the code like this, right? I in the code, in the Terraform configurations, I have like this: key hyphen, each key hyphen, each value. First bucket is created with the name dev hyphen Mithun Tech app S3 bucket. Second bucket is created QA hyphen Mithun Tech app S3 bucket. Third bucket created prod hyphen Mithun Tech, like this. I have a buckets, and if I go to the tags of that buckets also, it has added the tags. It has added the tags also. Do you see the tags? Whatever I have used, where is the tags? Do you see the tags also? Like this. For this bucket, the tags are like this. For another bucket, the tags are like this. Like this. Now, this is how you can use for each. Now, let me destroy. After our practice is done, let's destroy all these resources so that it will be clear. So try to practice these things. Tomorrow I'm not taking a session. Tomorrow and day after tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday, spend on the system. Try to practice count, meta argument, Try to practice for each meta argument with a set of strings and set of maps. Go through the recordings, what is we already discussed, what is resource block, what is provider block, what is data block, right? The Terraform workflow, and try to create and play around with some resources. I will continue remaining meta arguments. I'll continue remaining meta arguments in the next session. I'll continue remaining meta arguments like what is this provider life cycle, this depends on. We will continue in the future sessions. Okay, thank you guys. That's it for today. I'll continue on Monday. Go through all these concepts, play around with. I'll share this for your reference. I'll share these three folders, whatever has been discussed today. Count meta argument, for each meta argument map, for each meta argument set. Any questions before I start the
Uh,
session?
yes, sir. I have one query. Regarding this, you have created like different folders. So
Hmm.
can we merge for the same single file for these things?
But I don't want to create those many resources, right? In real time, whatever
Mhm.
resources you want to create, you can write in a Terraform. If I keep it in a single file, the problem is it will create all those resources. For understanding the concepts, why you need to create EC2 instances, 3 bucket IAM user, if you have a requirement, you create in a single module.
Okay, sir.
I hope you can understand what do you mean by module.
Right, sir. Right, sir. Thank you,
I am
sir.
explaining the concept here. So I am taking some resources to explain the concept. I don't want to create 100 different resources for explaining for each, right?
Correct, sir.
So that's what.
Thank you, sir.